So thanks for joining our enterprise risk management track. So we're going to walk through today just a few key industry disruptions. Disruptions that are leading to changes in enterprise risk management and the adoption of very large programs for managing risk compliance, audit, and other functional disciplines as we move work, from those groups in what traditionally we've called the functional groups or the second line of defense into the business. So why do we start here with the Avengers? I do a lot of traveling, and I often like to just eavesdrop. What is everyone watching in the movies, right? And it's become almost a dystopian universe of Marvel Comics and Deadpool, right? Going on in the seats around me. And I'm thinking, wow, what are we looking for, right? As we're seeking our entertainment. And, if you think about Avengers 3, it was called Avengers of Infinity War. And there, Thanos gathers all of his 6 Infinity Stones. He snaps his fingers, right? And he annihilates half the universe and half the population. Okay? It's not exactly what we expected from our superheroes, right? But, it's indicating that the public, really, in our entertainment, we're seeing the stones as some form of disruption, right? And maybe we don't want the dystopian outcome, that is so often the case in these movies. But like NASA, we're looking for change, something that is actually noble, right, in our companies, right? And we think about GRC and Michael's earlier message about performing with integrity as allowing people finally to bring that change from inside, right? So the question we're going to address in this presentation is what disruptions are forcing the adoption of governance, risk, and compliance. And it can be known as different things, right? But, kind of this group of veteran, scarred GRC practitioners, right? What noble change are you trying to bring to your company, right? And so in that, we're seeing, disruption. And it's coming in a variety of forms. And one of the leading forms in the last 2 years has been the need to create a solution that works in the front lines of your company, right? With the people doing the manufacturing, with the people doing the transactions with the customer. We sometimes call this the first line of defense, right? It's where we're taking the risk. It's where we face the compliance requirement in the new market or the new product we're trying to get into, right? So we're going to talk about, these first line of defense impacts, right? And, the first line, the business guys, the guys running the manufacturing plants, they need to get something useful out of what they do. And typically it's been revenue, right? But now they face, compliance requirements, risk assessments, management of third parties. How are we going to bring them something beneficial, right? Can we bring them meaningful, MI? Can we bring them predictive intelligence, right? That's actually going to shape their decision making, okay? And I think the second thing we're looking at is that the technology has truly evolved, right? And so what we're looking at are enterprise platforms, right, that allow us to bring consistency, not just in the language that we're using around risk and compliance, but the way we manage issues and actions, the way we do risk assessments, and actually rationalize and make sure that we are doing things in a way that's optimal for the guys and women that are in the trenches working with your customers in the market, okay? But the scars we all have in this room, right? It's not only about the technology, right? There's a lot that has to go into this in order to make GRC and enterprise risk management successful. We'll talk about that's more than just technology, right? And then we'll also talk about the fact that it's not a static environment. It's changing now faster than it's ever changed before, right? The way we think about our risk framework, right? It used to be we could look to the regulators and operational risk. It gave us 4 categories of risk. Now the regulators and our board and our business partners want us to be looking at what's most relevant, right? So we've got to be ever evolving and create frameworks that are built to change and adapt, okay? In addition, we recognize that this disruption in the way we're working, it's only going to happen if we attract talent that actually embraces disruption, right? Not just in the technology and the way we work, right? But the way our processes are driven, the types of talent we hire in the future, the next generation, right? So we're looking for people that are disruptors that are going to bring in more disruptors, right? And business as usual is not the answer, right? Okay, so that's the issue we'll talk about. And then, how can we look to collaborate and share outside of our company, across our lines of defense, first, second, and third line, so that we can achieve this performance with integrity that we've talked about this morning, that Michael talked about. Okay, so one of the first challenges is, leading from the front line, right? Michael showed that great slide of all the people now that are using the GRC platform or will be using it. Maybe they're just answering action plans, maybe formulating issues, doing risk assessments, but that list of things they're doing in the system is going to continue to expand. So how do we face that, right? So, companies believe they're shifting risk responsibilities to the first line, to the business guys, in order to accelerate performance. And 63% of companies said that was true today, okay? But only 13% of the companies said they believe they lead from the front to make those business decisions. So somehow, we're not yet making that translation from the input, so those people that want the responsibilities driven into the business, to those that believe they're able to lead, right, with the information that they're getting, right, and making them aware of more risk and better decision processes. So these first line of defense, the business guys, they're looking at rewards and risks, right? And we're looking at, the fact that they work in transactional systems. Maybe they work in your core banking platform. I'm assuming a financial services group, but imagine it could be the manufacturing plant. They may be in your payment system. They may be in the trading system. They may be in commercial loans. But, a GRC platform, we're talking about functions like enterprise risk, compliance, internal audit, policy, operational risk, IT risk, third-party risk. So how are those two worlds of systems working together? And you're looking at me and you're saying, well, they're not yet working together, okay? But this is part of the disruption that the first line is going to require, right? Is that somehow what we're doing in the GRC system gets layered in to the way they're doing their transactions. And layering it, it's a technological term, but it's one you can also visualize, right? And I'll go through an example in a moment. But the idea is, how can we make more risk-aware decisions, right? Influence the agenda of what's driving change within the company, right? And will the decision that we're making today about a new business transaction, will it increase our company revenues? Or could this possibly turn out to increase overall risk levels and harm the reputation and integrity of our company, right? And so we're going to try to align the risk management organization to our strategy. We're going to enable the first line of defense to do better risk reporting, use their information to drive better decisions. And we're going to drive that from a clear statement of risk appetite, right? And we're going to use that as a framework for making the decisions about, what's most important to layer in to the way we're doing business. So it's all about now that business enablement through the systems, through layering, right, of our GRC functionality. So how is that going to work? And is it just about managing compliance? Is it just about doing the risk assessment? No, it's about using the GRC tool to bring best practices in the way we're doing our business, okay? So let's see how that might happen. So if we imagine we work in a large, it could be a bank, it could be a paper company, where they're actually interacting with the market. In this example, it's a fund manager. They're almost at close. They've got a big order coming in. They say the trade is 4 times the size of the Irish market, and we're going to have to trade the Irish index. So what's that going to do? Well, the good manager is going to say, this may have compliance repercussions, right? Is it market manipulation? Or could it be deemed to be market manipulation? Could I get in trouble executing this trade? How much will my commission be? And how much will I lose if I don't execute this trade, right? So all kinds of thoughts are going through the head of this business guy, right? And then, moments before close, the fact that this transaction's come in triggers, this checklist based on our trader manipulation policy and requires a survey attestation in our trading application. So this guy's got Bloomberg up, and he's got his trading system where he's writing in the details of his trade, and all of a sudden pops up the screen asking him this compliance checklist, right? He completes that checklist. It immediately goes, to the quiet office of the compliance officer sitting in the background, who's getting an alert on their smart Apple Watch or whatever device they're using that this is matters of minutes before market close, and he better get to this. And he's going to make a decision based on the response to the questionnaire. Is this okay? Is this not okay? He's going to give his affirmative response, and the transaction's going to go through right before the end of the day, market close, right? And so this concept of GRC layering, as we've talked about it, in this case, it was just executing a compliance checklist, a compliance survey, through the transaction system, is actually going to increase throughput, increase the speed, not just of the transaction approval process, but of the kind of workflow back and forth between people in this organization. And the business guy, the trader that got to execute his trade coming in at the last minute, is saying, "Thank goodness for GRC. I got my commission, I got to execute this trade, and without GRC, right, this could never have happened on the same day. In our institution, we would have missed this order completely, given the competition in the market, right, without this kind of layering and ability to instantiate, we call, best practices around how we're going to execute in the business, but comply and work with integrity because of this information available in our GRC tool, okay? Now, is this futuristic? No, it's happening today. Is it perfect layering? Is it perfectly seamless? Not in all organizations, right? But this is a vision of that platform technology strategy that Michael was talking about earlier, where we're able to take these requirements, compliance requirements, and turn them into, a very active, way of doing business in a market, right? And imagine how far ahead this puts this fund manager in question, this asset management company, compared to the rest of the market that may not have envisioned this kind of GRC layering themselves, right? Okay, good. So we're using that GRC technology to instantiate those best practices. Okay, how is this possible? Well, we're moving to our second kind of disruption, that we were talking about earlier, And that is this enterprise platform technology, right, that allows us GRC. And at the very heart is the business person, right, is the person doing the business. And they're imagining a world where on the top right, their operational systems interact seamlessly, right, with the calendars and their ability to see tasks, and might be risk assessments, it might be attestations, but also get the benefit of those collaborative workflows that are automatically triggered and send the text messages, to the person responsible for doing approvals, linking that where it doesn't work well, linking that to the need for training, and creating, kind of an engaged social network where all of this is happening, right? And technology is at the center, right, of all of these possibilities, right? That 10 years ago, I think we were really just thinking about. But now we're saying, okay, a little bias here of MetricStream, but there's some technology platform in the center, right? And around that center is all of the capabilities we've enabled, often through integrations, right? Not necessarily from the platform itself. And we're able to bring, the integration with our biggest competitor, which is Microsoft Office, right? And the Outlook tools, the Excel, the Word, that people are used to working in. With a responsive user interface, a GRC data model, and then that world that we're looking at around natural language processing, artificial intelligence, making better decisions because we've got the machine understanding business rules that we may have applied, but also learning from the data to create new business rules, right? And that's the essence of a lot of the artificial intelligence we've been talking about, right? So again, this platform technology becomes the enabler of this capability, right? And again, here we're just looking at, value creation is the goal of our technology. 88% of companies, respondents would agree with that, is, why we do risk management, why we're going to invest in a platform. Okay, but it's less than 40% of companies that have actually invested, right, in implementing a tool and an approach, a GRC-like approach, in their company, right? So there's a lot of possibility, a lot of enablement from the core, we call it, that central enterprise platform, that's going to enable us, the strategic planners on the top left, to interact, right, with the compliance professionals, the risk managers, the auditors, the people in the background creating the policies, the framework, the system requirements that form the core of how a company is operating, right? And so all of this is coming together to create value because we've identified our risks, we've linked those risks to our objective, we're prepared for responsive risk monitoring, and we're setting that tone through our strategy work, in terms of what do our people have to achieve and, how are we going to manage the risk? Who in the business is responsible? So again, linking those objectives to the risks through the business units, and then, whether it's operational risks or reputational risks or system risks, cybersecurity risks, and then ultimately through the way we work in our business processes, right? And all of that on the right-hand side, you'd recognize that as your GRC taxonomy, right? That common language that we've created in order to allow the strategy, right, to actually interact and optimize the way we're managing risk within a company, okay? And then again, it's just another way of looking at this enterprise platform where at the center, we go back to the idea of that person, that business person sitting there, and we've got to be thinking about their user experience and how they're going to operate. Will they be using mobile devices? Are they going to expect that notification on their smartwatch or on their smartphone? And then, they're They're saying, okay, great, we're going to give you all this risk management information. We'll do our risk assessment. We'll do our, checklist for compliance. But how do we get something back for that, right? And that's going to be through these integrations. Kind of the buzzword out there today is data wrangling, right? It's kind of the bigger topic. The statistical analysis will apply, the artificial intelligence, the RPA, robotic process automation, that we're seeing, the natural language processing, right? And we're going to see that because we're interacting, we're layering into the transaction systems on the right-hand side, right? And we're powering up that platform to bring that integration between, what might have been called the back office, the middle office systems, right? And the way the front office is managing their transaction activity, okay? Now, is this far-fetched? No, so let's give some examples. So there is a large airport operator. If you attended our London summit, they talked and spoke about the fact that they use a GRC platform, MetricStream, to collect information about their incidents and issues across the different business areas. So they had food operations, plane maintenance, airport operations, logistical support, and things would always go wrong. So they capture those incidents, they capture the issues on their mobile devices, write up descriptions, and then they're asking themselves, well, those people that have identified those specific incidents have been terrific in writing that up, and they understand within the operation they're supporting what that incident means and how it's rated, whether it's high, medium, or low. But how does it relate across all the incidents we're seeing across time, but also across our business units, across regions, countries, all the airports we're operating, right? And so they're applying natural language processing and business rules in the machine. So if the machine starts identifying common words or phrases, the machine can then send the alert to a specific role saying, we're seeing many times that that incidents are reported around blue vans. I just use that as an example, right? But then, the machine can send that intelligence, pipe that in, and, blue van, that may be an emerging issue for us. We need to look into that, across our operations, all the different business units, all of our regions, okay? So natural language processing at work, right? Using business rules that we've kind of initially put in, but the machine learning and creating new rules based on that learning. Robotic process automation. One of the largest banks in the world using MetricStream to manage their operational risk management globally. They have operation centers around the world. And one of the findings in their movement to a GRC system is that there are a lot of tasks that are repetitive and not all that interesting that people are performing. One example was uploading spreadsheets, right? So they may capture information out in the business in a far-flung region in a spreadsheet, and then that person who is the expert that captured that information is spending 15 minutes to 30 minutes, right? And we're going to have all the users send their spreadsheets, uploading spreadsheets to Maria. She's a user, and then she's going to do the uploading, right? And the word, no one knew, but Maria was actually an RPA. She was a bot, right? And it's just like when you go to make a reservation on Hilton, right? The bot says, "Can I help you?" Right? Well, the bot's going to kind of increase the robotic automation of mundane tasks around their global operational risk management, right? First step, though, was actually identifying, how they're going to manage risk and what kind of processes are going to be the normal, and then, finding those that are repetitive and don't require subject matter expertise, right? So those are just some examples, and I think you can see how that kind of analytics, that type of process automation could help drive the linkage between what we're doing in risk and compliance and audit, and how that could help foster a more efficient interaction with the guys and women working in the first line through the core transaction systems of the company, right? So, we're bringing together those applications, we're bringing together content, and we're bringing together training, right, based on what we're learning. So it becomes a virtuous cycle of process improvement in risk and compliance, instantiation of best practices, in our company. Okay, and then another look, finally, again, at this idea of an enterprise platform, because, this is, as Michael said, one of our big investments in MetricStream right now is looking at how that enterprise platform will interact, will it be through mobile devices? What does the user experience need to be? How will we gamify that user experience? How will we make it more compelling than using your spreadsheet or your Word document or just sending emails back and forth to each other, right? And then, looking for that end-to-end solution, the integration with your operational systems, the data wrangling we talked about, and then, you can look at a slide and say it's simple, but, three-layer approach from a platform to the integrations, to the applications that people are using to manage their incidents, to manage regulatory engagements, to manage their compliance checklists, to manage regulatory change, to manage third parties, to manage risk assessments, as well as threats and vulnerability, IT compliance, right? All of that coming together, in a central platform with the ability to integrate to those operational systems, okay? So that really is the second disruptor that we talked about. So the first one, again, was, how the business, how increasingly we're leading from the front. The second disruptor we talked about was that enterprise platform, okay? The third disruptor is about the fact that this requires a big community to make it successful. A big community, and only, it turns out, a small fraction is technology, right? And, we'll talk in a case study later today about, how some companies that have set up, what we call a GRC program office, think the technology might be 10 to 20% of your issues, right? The other things we're talking about are, how do we convince our users that, oh yeah, we've done things our way at whatever bank or, a fund management company or manufacturing firm. We've done that for decades, but now we're just going to introduce an industry standard approach. Right, we're going to take a best practice approach, and we may change the way you're doing risk assessment. We may change the way you're looking at compliance. We may change the way we're evaluating third parties. We're recognizing that, getting these changes in mindsets, creating a program where, people are thinking about, the types of applications that can be automated. What can we do in third-party management that will help us automate? What can we do in risk assessment? What can we do in compliance or audit? This often is a journey, and it's a change management journey of, taking the mindset that existed and thrived, as cottage industries, owning your spreadsheets, owning your point solutions, to one where they say there's more benefit in collaboration. There's more benefit in, efficiently working with the first line, right, than continuing the ways of the past. It's third thing here is it's about our customer community. It's about why you attend a summit like this today. You can sit in sessions like this, and I can tell you stories. Michael can tell you stories. You'll hear 3 days of stories. But the best thing is going to be when you're out in the hallway, or you're at lunch, or you're at our Camden Yards offsite tonight, talking to your peers, right? And they may be in different industries, but they're going to tell you stories and you're going to share best practices. And a lot of those best practices are not about how you do a risk assessment or what rating scale you use for rating impact. It's going to be about, how did you capture the heart and mind of the business guys? How did you integrate training and a learning program into your GRC journey, right? And, get to the level of end user adoption, get to that analytics vision where you're now past just the data collection and you're thinking about, how are we going to give back to the people that provided the inputs to this pool of data and create, kind of the roadmap for how we make more strategic, risk-informed decisions, right? And here, there are other things that we talk about. Of course, I could have added 6 and 7. Governance is very critical, right? When the general was talking about, how do you manage in a very federated way, right? He basically talked about decentralized groups, governance groups that could make decisions very quickly, right? Setting up that kind of governance is critical. And then also, building business process transformation. How are you going to do that, okay? So, the technology superheroes, they put the technology in place. And then it's kind of the GRC superheroes that put the program in place, right? And decide all the elements that are required to bring the disruptive change that we're talking about within the company, okay? And then, the next question that we talked about, disruptive question, was about talent, right? And, there's been a great change in organizations over the last 5 years, and a lot of more executive sponsorship of governance, risk, and compliance or enterprise risk management. And those personalities, we call them personas at MetricStream. It's the chief audit executive, right? The chief compliance officer, the chief risk officer, the CISO, the chief information officer, right? And these people are under a lot of pressure today to change the way work is done, right? And the change may be, you've got to deliver 20% cost savings in 2 years. The change may be, look, you've got to bring a much better reputational outcome to the business activities that we're doing. We have to become more risk aware. You've got to move that risk awareness into the business, right? Or it could be, that we simply have to create less noise in the business about the risk and compliance work that we're doing and create a passion and love for how we do compliance assessment or risk management, how we support audit, okay? But GRC is showing the way, and these personalities, these personas, are often leading the way with more and more interest. The trend we're seeing in the market, more and more interest from the business side, right? So from the chief operating officer, from the CEO. MetricStream was just informed for one of the world's largest banks, our system ownership, we've been operating for over 4 years at this company as a global platform, and it just moved from kind of joint ownership between risk and compliance to now the chief operating officer owns our system and will from this point on set the priorities, right, for the system itself. So we don't take this as an isolated example, and the reason is because what we're seeing is for the one of the top 3 banks in the UK. Our system is, the GRC system, call it. The GRC system is the second largest system in the company. The first largest system is in terms of number of users, is the HR system. HR is, that's compulsory, right? People are putting in their performance reviews and responding to performance reviews. But, the system in that organization that has the second highest user count is GRC. And that's not isolated. There's another example, another large bank, where the largest system is the core deposit platform, right? So it's, how people are using the deposits, transactions, withdrawals and deposits. But second to that core banking platform is the GRC platform. So no wonder, right, the level of interest is shifting from what you might traditionally call these functional personalities to a business person. It could be a chief operating officer, it could be a CEO. And for some companies, this happened long ago, okay? So that's part of the disruption, but the real disruption is around people is, finding those that really embrace technology, embrace disruption, embrace change, sometimes because it is just change, but bringing those best-of-breed ideas to bring short-term results, sustained innovation, to a point where 69% say that the shortage of skills in new and emerging technology impedes the effectiveness of the risk function, right? 66% of respondents say the shortage of core risk management skills impedes or impacts the effectiveness of risk management. So in both cases, you guys, whether you're the technology innovators or the domain risk and compliance experts, you're in short supply. You should feel very comfortable in your seats, right? If you're using that information, that knowledge, that domain that you have, that attitude about technology to drive your company forward. Because these are the skill sets companies are looking for more generally. And then, you look at the future and, it's not just GRC, but, the industry's going to be investing more in automation on the right-hand side. 85% say they're going to be spending more on machine learning, right? Automate those business rules, have the machine smartly determine new business rules. And then, they're going to increase 78% increase the investment in deep learning, right? So that's the fifth disruptor we've talked about is people and talent, right? Last week I was in London attending a RegTech conference, and I was struck by the number of, technology companies, small innovators in risk and compliance that are bringing ideas and solutions, right, to the way we think about risk and compliance. So when we talked about fintech 2 years ago, the big buzzword today is RegTech, right? Because fintechs kind of realized that the market and a lot of the budget is in RegTech. Okay, so we'll continue to see that in MetricStream, in our open architected platform, we're going to look to continue to integrate a lot of that good technology in the way we bring solutions, right? But it will also push us forward as innovators as well. We probably have about 5 minutes left. I've got one more disruptor that I was going to go through. There were 6. But I also wanted to see if there were questions. So I'll do my best to see raised hands. We have a few people with microphones in the room. But in terms of the last disruptor, really it's, basically the point that unlike enterprise ERP systems or enterprise HR systems, you have to establish a GRC framework built on compromise, built on change, built on regulatory requirements, right, that don't seem to change, but if we look back 10 years, we see pretty dramatic evolution, right? Constant board demands and requests, right? And the need for deeper insights and explanations about what's going on, right? And so, it's about a risk management framework, the way we monitor risk, the way we monitor compliance, that's open to change, right? So across our business objective, our organization, our product and processes. So we're looking at a broader set of risk categories. Remember Basel II, it was simple: people, process, systems, and technology, right? External, right? Now, the regulator expects, you've identified your top 10, right? And maybe you have more refined categories around cybersecurity or talent risks or just third-party management, right, as key risks that we're managing. One of our biggest customers talks about the importance of managing risk appetite. And if they could do it all over again, they would manage risk appetite or involve the business in the discussion of risk management very early on. So a topic like data protection. Do you want to protect data? Everyone says, absolutely. Our bank data is most secret and most important. We've got to preserve it at all costs. Okay, so we have zero tolerance for data disruption risk, right? Any cyber theft of, personal information or anything like that. So I guess that means that when customers and employees come into our building, we're going to frisk them. We're going to scan everything they bring in, like an airport security line, right? And we're going to make them turn over their laptops and devices before they can go up and visit us in our offices. And they say, the private bank says, well, maybe not. That's probably not a good idea. We want to have our customers come visit. We want to talk to them. Okay, so what is the acceptable level? So if you're going to let the employees take their laptops in and out of the office building, you're going to let the customers come in, bring their bags and bring their thumb drives and everything else with them, how much risk will we take, right? And in that discussion with the business, they decide that, customers should be able to come in just registering their name. They should be able to bring up anything they want. But, the business came to the conclusion that they're willing to accept some risk, right? Our employees have to be connected to the internet. Our employees have to be able to connect to external websites, right? Oh, you mean we're going to have an open network then, right? Oh, okay, so we're going to accept the fact that we're going to use scanning systems and try to find what's wrong, but we're not going to prevent, any kind of potential vulnerability. Well, that's right. Okay, so they've come to an agreement with the business, that data protection, yes, it's important, but they're willing to accept some risk. Okay, you're willing to accept that risk. What kind of controls will be in place? How much are you investing in those controls, right? And there's a very pointed and important discussion going on and continuing about the control environment, right? And what the risks they're willing to accept and the investment that they have to make in these controls. Data protection just being one of many risks they're considering. But it's an example where, if one of our customers could do it again, they would start with that discussion of risk appetite, right? And decide, kind of what risks were important and then, what the control environment was going to look like very deliberately, right? And then, kind of a central way of managing our taxonomy and our impact rating scales, centralized processes, managing visualization of processes, our issue management. And then, so finally, building our GRC system for change. And that's something, really, the ERP system, they have a chart of accounts. And yeah, you change the chart of accounts, but a chart of account change, if you've ever been involved in it, it can take 2 or 3 years, right? You tell that to a risk professional, they'll laugh. They don't have 2 or 3 years. They may have a few months, right? And changing the risk framework has implications and ripple effects, beyond just the risk function. Now we're talking about compliance, audit, everyone that's tied in the second line or the functional groups, and now, of course, all the impacts across the first line, owners, increasingly the owners of this system. Okay, so basically then we're just talking about, how we've managed disruption, the types of disruption that we're seeing, and how, we are upping the game, you as professionals sitting in this room, how you're upping the game in enterprise risk management and ultimately in a broader GRC program, okay? So open for questions. Any thoughts or comments, concerns? Yes? Good. They're right in the center here. Thanks, Kurt. Sure.
I just was curious, you have digital infrastructure at the bottom. Why not just infrastructure in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, because digital infrastructure happens to be, kind of whether it's data protection or cybersecurity vulnerability management, what we're focused on. But you're right, there are, professionals in your organization focused on the physical infrastructure as well. Didn't mean to leave it out, but it's just, something that we're seeing as more important and has been brought out as a key risk category. Where we were maybe 10 years ago had 4 risk categories. The things in the center box, like your third parties and the way you're managing third parties, the way you're managing your digital infrastructure, your business continuity. These are areas that we've seen in the market have higher focus today. It doesn't mean other things are not important. It just means maybe these are areas where the board of directors is expecting responses about our control environment or the level of risk we're assessing. You could go ahead. I'll repeat your question. Yeah. So you also talked about bots in the earlier slide. Oh, what? About bots. Bots, yeah.
So as far as some of the risk in implementing bots, can you talk a little bit more about that?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, poor Maria at this large bank, where Maria was tasked with uploading spreadsheets, right? And, Maria is only as good as those spreadsheets that are coming in from the users that are recognizing her and sending her the spreadsheets for upload. But the minute that person who's sending in the spreadsheet has changed the format slightly or has entered data, the wrong kind of data in the date field, for example, the bot can diligently do their work, but it's only the kind of the data integrity controls and the review by a person, in the second line of defense that makes sure that Maria is actually uploading data with integrity. That's just an example, but it was a hard lesson learned because a lot of the tools or, formats for the precious data we're managing are in uncontrolled formats, like an Excel spreadsheet, uncontrollable formats. So until we can get out of that, poor Maria is going to have a lot of risk. So she will continue to have to be supported by a person. That's just one example, right? Yeah. Yeah.
My question is on your third-party ecosystem.
Yeah.
Can you explain from your experience how that's growing from a regulatory standpoint and trickling down to some of the clientele that you see?
Yeah, good question. So I guess it was 2011 the OCC came out with FFIEC guidance around third-party management, basically saying you had to manage every third party just like an employee, right? And the same type of background checks and monitoring that you would do of your employee, you're now applying to this, third-party entity. So, banks and, other organizations have quickly, gotten to the point where they know they need to manage a repository of third parties. They need to be understanding risk as they onboard that third party. They need to be monitoring it as the third party relationship persists, and then they need to have triggers, either a contract end or SLA agreement violation, when that third party would be offboarded, right, and the relationship would end. So, much more diligence around the management end-to-end of that third party, but also from a regulator perspective, the focus because of financial crime compliance on, who are the bad guys, PEP list, OFAC list, so the need to continuously monitor. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but it's a very broad one, and companies are learning, not just banks, that third-party management is actually, depending on how much they've outsourced, one of the most important forms of risk assessment that they're doing. Yeah. Okay, so we're out of time, unfortunately, but I do want to thank all the superheroes in the room, right? The superheroes are the GRC professionals, right? And you're bringing disruption and really a performance revolution. And, as a GRC practitioner, what we're seeing in the market is that this kind of disruption is your friend. right? It's going to catapult your program. It's going to catapult your career. And we have lots of examples. And then from the earlier discussion, use your soft power skills as superheroes, right? Bring innovation like NASA, within your